Hi, everybody. Glad everybody could make it that's in the chat. And this is Casey from HashtagHeathen.
Hi.
Also, what is it? I put it in the description, but your Twitter is like
HashtagHeathen Casey.
Casey. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, yeah, her link is down below if you guys want to talk to her or anything on a personal level. She's been investigating this way more than I have. I know very little about it. This was her and Nell's deal. Nell's is having phone issues right now, so he'll be on with us in just a few minutes. So, thank you, Dave.
Yes, thank you.
You can always rely on Dave. He's one of my favorite shills. Thank you, Dave. So, okay, so we were just talking about what you're doing on your show. Well, you want to tell us a little bit about that and what you guys are going over?
Sure. Right now, well, when I went no contact with my mother, I have 3 sisters. They're all older. So they had actually gone no contact before me. But they recommended this book. And it's called Will I Ever Be Good Enough by Dr. Carol McBride. And basically, we're going over it chapter by chapter. It deals specifically with daughters of narcissistic mothers. So both a friend of mine, Mrs. Narky, and I were raised in that sort of environment. And so we're kind of going through it, and hopefully it'll help some people out there.
There you go. So what have you noticed that how it has it affected you personally? Dealing with that, like your childhood and into adulthood? How has that affected you?
It's everything. One of the shows, I realized things little by little here and there that, you know, something that was making me anxious that shouldn't be a big deal. I usually try and figure out why it is. And one of the things is I would run the water in the bathroom, kind of doing like my nighttime routine, because it takes a long time for the water to heat up. And I realized that if I had walked away or it was taking me longer to get back to it, that I would start panicking. And I'm like, well, this is weird. Like, what's the deal? But we would be yelled at if we left water on. So that's just another like tiny thing in the back of my head that it affects everything, really, especially relationships with other people.
Well, of course, because all of your issues, any issues that anybody has, rolls over into a relationship, and it affects the other person is because of what it's doing to yourself. So that makes sense.
Yeah, and I ended up with the diagnosis of PTSD, depression, and anxiety. So.
Right. Well, at least you didn't become a narcissist yourself, so that's a common thing.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Constant worry about it, though.
That can be very, very... Right. That can be very, very ugly. There he is. Hey, buddy.
I would like to first off thank my wife for turning the car around. She was about 5 miles away.
Oh.
And she had to deal with the brunt of my panic attack.
Oh.
And she was on her way to visit her narcissistic mother.
Oh, that's great.
Well,
I'm going to catch hell for that. Right.
Hi, Casey. It's nice to meet you finally.
Hi. Yes, nice to see you face to face. Kind of.
Kind of face.
Actually, honestly, I love that we could do this. I love that we are able to get on a video and talk to each other and see facial expressions, because you get so much more out of a vocal conversation and out of seeing someone's mannerisms and how they're acting and how they feel, and you can compensate for that than just texting or chatting online with someone and you lose so much in interpretation. So this is it's an amazing platform to be able to do this on. So
yeah, it's great.
Anyway, so Casey was just telling us, Nels, how her narcissistic mother has affected her life. So so Casey, at what point did you and your... Oh, you heard some of it? Good. At what point did you and your sisters realize, hey, this is a problem? Did you guys realize it collectively, or?
It was kind of my eldest sisters. One is 10 years older than me, and then it's 8, and then it's 7. So there's quite the gap between the 3 oldest girls and then me. I think that with my 2 eldest sisters, they were pretty intertwined as far as like figuring this out, and because they had found it out in therapy. Basically, one of my sister's therapists recommended the book that we're going over, and we kind of learned. But for me, yeah, it was years later. I was 25 when I decided to go no contact with Mom and kind of try and see it as abuse, number one, because I didn't growing up at all.
Well, yeah, it's just how Mom is.
Mm-hmm.
That's just Mom.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, in fact, it took my fiance saying, like, this is not normal. And I was like, what's not normal? And they're like, he's like, how your mom is treating you, that's not normal. I'm like, what? It just blew my mind.
What do you mean?
I was
it's
confused.
Just Mom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately that happens. So have you not spoke to her since you were 25 at all?
Yeah, no, there's been no contact. And she actually passed away in 2016. So, but she would call every now and then. But that's about it. I didn't return her calls or anything. I had offered to go into family therapy with her. But she said, basically, I am the way I am. I've been like this my whole life. And if you don't like it, you can leave. So I'm like, well, I need to take care of myself.
Oh.
I can't take care of you and me. I'm disabled. So, and it did wonders for my stress level. Holy crap.
Oh, I bet. It was probably like losing a 50-pound child off your back.
Yes, it was.
I imagine. Yeah. Absolutely. So do your sisters have no contact with her still as well? No one speaks to her?
Yeah, towards the end of her life.
I mean, up until the time she, right.
Yeah, towards the end of her life, one of my sisters did move back in with her and try, like, helping her, because she had osteoporosis pretty bad. And so she spent probably the last year, I think, in contact with her. But other than that, no, the rest of us, once we went no contact, it was no contact.
Right. And did you have a father in the picture during all of this, or?
He, unfortunately, Mom really pushed him out. They divorced when I was 2 or 3, and so he would try to be around, but every time he did, she would be abusive towards him. So I didn't start getting close to him until after I stopped talking to Mom, and then I could, figure out that he wasn't entirely to blame for that, because I did blame him for leaving us.
Well, yeah, because it's the one not there. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. But now I do. Now I have a wonderful relationship with him, so.
Oh, that's good. Well, good. It's not all a wash. At least you have one good parent.
Yes.
One sane parent. Yeah, that's really important. That's really important. So you were at the age of 25, you were diagnosed with PTSD and depression?
Mm-hmm. The depression came earlier, because I've been chronically ill since I was 18. I think it was around my early 20s that depression anxiety was diagnosed. And then it was 22 or 23, I think, that the PTSD diagnosis came in. So it was shortly before going no contact with Mom, but I couldn't tell her because my childhood was a huge reason why I got PTSD. So I couldn't just say, oh, well, I have PTSD and have her go, well, from what? And say, well, from you.
Right. Yeah, and open that can of worms.
Yeah,
right.
No. So, but I finally once I went no contact with her, then I really got to work in therapy and deal with coping and strategies for changing the psyche in a way.
So you went through some form of a cognitive behavioral therapy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I still see a psychologist, and he is absolutely wonderful. And yeah, I think it is technically CBT, but I'm not real good with like the terminologies and stuff. But yeah, it made a world of difference going to therapy and, you know, medication too. But therapy continues. Like I said, I continue to discover things. So I can bring that up to my psychologist then and be like, hey, what can I do about this?
Yeah. Like, I just noticed this thing. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, that's good. That's good. So how old are you now, if you don't mind saying that you've been doing this therapy?
No, that's fine. I'm 33, so it's been 8 years now that I've been working on it.
8 years. Okay, good. Good for you. Nels and I frequently talk about people who are afraid to reach out and start that therapy. You know, they don't want to be judged, or they're afraid they're going to have the wrong therapist, or they're scared to just delve into it.
Mm-hmm. And it can happen. You can get a therapist that you just don't vibe with, that you don't, you're not comfortable with. But like, I really encourage those people to keep trying and, you know, keep going until you do find one you're comfortable with.
Yeah, it's very important to have that. There's a certain click that you have with certain people just in life. And you have to find that therapist that you have that click with. And I know it. I've been through 3. And I never did find that click, although the last one was probably the best one because she also had PTSD.
Okay.
So she related more to what I was, you know, than anybody else had yet. So but yeah, absolutely. You have to dig around and you know, go for a month, 1 day a week, a month, and see if you like the person. If you don't, go find someone else, and don't be afraid to and you know, and that's a problem too for people like that, because that just dawned on me, because people who have always been told that they're wrong and they're not good enough, and they don't want to approach the therapist and say, oh, I don't want to stop, I don't want to come anymore, I'm not comfortable with you. So that puts them in another issue of having to deal with that.
Yeah, saying no is hard, because you really weren't allowed to growing up.
Right. Absolutely. So, you said Miss Snarky also has a narcissistic mother?
Yeah,
and that's how you guys got on this?
Both, actually. She had a narcissistic mom and dad. So that was like an interesting clash of power dynamics that she kind of grew up into. But yeah, they were also neglectful and physically abusive to her. So yeah, it's bittersweet finding people who have gone through this, because you don't want to have people go through this. But at the same time, when you find somebody who knows like what you went through and can empathize with it, you know, that helps a lot.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
I have to give Mrs. Snorky credit for me being able to open up myself about having PTSD.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it was when she was discussing it one time. That's when I finally stepped out of the cat jokes and all that. And I said, me too. You know, I'm right there with you. I have the same thing. And that was the first time I've ever opened up publicly to anyone about my situation.
Well, I'm glad you did.
Could say that was the catalyst that led me here to this point.
And
we're glad you're here, Nels.
Yes.
Thank you.
You know, I love you, man.
Make it.
So, Nels, from a person who is with someone who had a narcissistic parent, what are some of the things that's affected you guys' your relationship and your lives because of that?
Well, my mother-in-law is a pain in the butt. She almost she did not approve of my wife marrying me, and was not going to attend our wedding service. She was going to protest that. Another thing that happened one time, this is just typical of the things that I've had to deal with in my marriage. She didn't even want to tell her, my wife did not even want to tell her that we got engaged. She was so afraid of her scorn.
Mm-hmm.
And one incident that I can relate was Christmas of 99. It was 2000, my wife informs me, that a friend of the family's was having a Christmas party. It wasn't even at their house, it was a third party, and I was told that I was not invited to go. So I spent Christmas Day home alone because my mother-in-law did not want me to. We weren't married at that point. Yeah.
And that's horrible for her, because that's supposed to be a time of joy. Like, I'm engaged.
Mm-hmm.
I found this wonderful guy. We're in love, and she's scared to tell anybody. That had to be horrible for her to be caught in the middle of that.
The night that I proposed to her, instead of like, oh yes, I'll marry you, I was afraid you were going to say this, and she was just afraid of her mother's condemnation over it. Yeah. That like, instead of being happy that I presented her with a nice engagement ring, she was just she basically had a panic attack, I guess.
Mm. Yep.
Jesus.
I'm gonna try and put. I might have to include spaces though. Yeah.
Well, as I actually looked this up prior to us doing this,
okay. So we can kind of go
so
over
I could get an idea of the top most common. I found the most common 8 issues as adults that we have. So they are PTSD, extreme narcissism, the parentified child can develop laser-like focus on their parents and the parents' needs. Fierce independence, need panic, which can make their child terrified of their needs, who bury them by becoming compulsive caretakers or simply falling silent. Insecure attachment, that kind of speaks for itself.
Codependency.
Echoism, echoing the parent. And then chronic self-blame, which I think all of us, a lot of us have that for different issues.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean,
from a lot of different childhood issues, but that's a pretty common denominator. But yeah. So, I guess really what we have to hope is that the child doesn't become a narcissist themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's hard to say over and over again with other S words.
I've had to edit out plenty of like bloopers in our series of us just trying to say the word narcissistic.
Yeah, narcissistic.
Yeah,
definitely less.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So so those are the top 8 issues that we have as adults, and which I can't argue with any of that. I think I've seen that in anybody I've known that's had a narcissistic parent. Like I said, that's been a small experience for me, but so your series you're doing with Mrs. Snarky, you said you're like halfway through the book, or?
We're 2/3 of the way through. The last third is the recovery section. So we've gone over basically like why we are the way we are, what made us that way, and then in this part, we're going to go over what we can do to change that or improve the sort of bad things that come from that sort of childhood.
Good. That's excellent. That's really excellent. Because, the bottom line is there's so many stigmas attached to all these different issues that we have. And I keep saying over and over again, just be a good parent. It affects so much.
It really
just
does.
The little things. You know, not being consistent, not in discipline, not having a set schedule for the child. Like, all of this stuff adds up and really can screw up some kids' lives. And I don't know if the parents don't realize it or if they just don't care enough to even pay attention to it. I'm not sure what the main factor is of it. Are they just so wrapped up in themselves they don't see it?
Well, with the narcissistic, yeah, definitely. They don't, like, they're the most important person. As long as they're taken care of, nothing else matters. But, you know, I've also seen families that they just don't know better, that do things that aren't healthy for their children. But I'm glad that there seems to be an uptick in parents, like, looking into actual psychology of children and modeling their parenting off of that instead of just trying to fly by the seat of their pants. And
yeah, and you know, it happens a lot. For instance, my ex-husband, back when I was trying to pretend like I was straight, his father was very, very hard on him. Like, whew. I mean, he was pretty much just an asshole when he was growing up. He tried to make up for it later on in life and became a better person and saw his faults and admitted them, which is amazing at 61 years old or whatever he was at the time. But the oh shit, what was I gonna say? God, I hate it when I go blank. I should have looked at the chat. Damn it, Nels, tell me to quit looking at the chat.
Yeah. I have that happen all the time.
I was starting to read what you wrote and I lost.
But you were talking about your husband and his dad being hard on him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And you know, he was such a kind, sweet. I mean, his dad was hard on him. His mother was basically a narcissist, just a milder version, but she was very demanding, me all the time. And his father was too strict, and he was in the Navy. He'd go out to sea, he'd come home, and the mother would bitch about, oh, he did this, and he literally would put him through a wall. Like, he threw his 8 or 9 year old child through some walls, and then made him fix the drywall.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
Made him patch it. So by the time he was 12, he knew how to patch drywall, literally.
Well,
from the holes from his head and his back hitting walls. So. And the amazing thing is that although he had a temper, the temper only came out when it was absolutely necessary. Like when someone got abusive on someone else, or he had to defend someone, or so he ended up being a really great guy, but man, that had to have been tough to.
Oh yeah, that had
it's
to be
just like, yeah. It's just like my father was a racist, or as me and my brother prefer to say, anti-ethnicist, because it's the human race. The racist is kind of stupid anyways. He was very anti-ethnicist, and to this day, when I see someone of color or not of good upbringing doing something, I still hear him in the back of my head, and I'm like, God, go away. So, I mean, how is that for you with your mother? Like, do you still hear all that crap in your head from her after all these years?
Yep. And like, so part of what happens is that you fear abandonment. So when you form relationships, you're always worried that they're going to just say, you know, screw you and leave. So you try to keep like impressing them, or, you know, doing things for them, because you are always seen as like not who you are, but what you can do for your parent. Like, that's what was important. And you also, like, I want validation from people, but then I don't believe it when they say it. So it's like a catch-22. And that they're like, no, you're a really good person. I'm like, yeah, okay. And just... Yeah,
that's not what Mom said. Right.
Yeah, and that's what I'll hear is her saying, yeah, but, you know, what about this or what about that? Yeah, the voices remain.
Casey, have you found from your experiences that you become a magnet for narcissists, that in romantic relationship, you kind of gravitate towards being drawn to narcissistic people?
Yeah. And that, what I believe is for two different reasons. Number one, it's because it's normal for us. We're used to dealing with that, so it doesn't seem out of the ordinary. And number two, you tend to be a really big pushover when you come out of this situation. So narcissists are like, oh, I can take advantage of you. So they kind of gravitate towards you because they can do whatever they want, pretty much.
Yeah, I've been a magnet for that kind of thing.
Yeah, it sucks.
Well, because Nels, your father was a narcissist, right?
I think he tended towards that. I didn't really see it so much as a child, but Casey, I'll enlighten you to a previous conversation. My sister eloped when I was in the 6th grade at 18 years old, I guess it was. And that was Daddy's little girl. And when he realized he had no longer had control of his most precious asset, I guess you could call it, you know, the star of his life, he doubled down on controlling me. And I couldn't turn around, I couldn't pick up the phone, hang up the phone. It's like, why? You know, it's just everything had to be absolutely controlled by him. And our relationship, just because I'm at this time, I'm going into 7th grade now. I'm finding my own identity as a young teen and whatever. So I want to learn things myself, listen to my own music, do my, you know, and nothing met with his approval. Everything was critical. And that went all the way up to, like, I became a vegetarian at, I think I was 22 years old. And that was just, you know, this was a meat and potatoes man, and he did not understand these lifestyle decisions and was highly critical of it. And he called it freak food. He's like, where'd you get this freak food? What do you? So it was, yeah, just, you know, condemning me, making lifestyle decisions.
Wow. Yeah, that definitely.
Well, it's not his norm, so it's.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I was just gonna say it's not his way, so you know, it's kind of the my way or the highway type thing.
Right.
Well, I took the highway.
Nell said, "Check you later, man, buddy. I gotta go." I mean, you know, that's really the best thing. I hate to say it. I have a toxic brother, and he's kind of in the middle of all of us, ish. And not the one on here. He's amazing. But I had to cut him out of my life a few years ago. Matter of fact, it's been 3 years this month. Because the mental abuse and the mental crap I just couldn't take it. And I called everybody in the family and I told them, look, this is what's going on. I'm done. You can do whatever you want with him. He's your brother. I'm done with it. Blood relation does not mean I have to be family with him.
Right.
And he's toxic for me. He's insulting. He's degrading. He's like all this stuff you don't want an older brother to be. That's how he is. And he always was with me. And like you, when I cut him out, oh, it was so nice. Just hit and ignore on those phone calls. Because, you know, I'm one of those people, if I say I'm done, I'm done. And I haven't spoke a word, not a message, not a Facebook message. He's tried to get a hold of me on his girlfriend's phone. I have her phone number. It rings. I know it's him. I ignore it. So, yeah, sometimes it's the most freeing thing just to get that person out of your life. Toxic people, those of us who have mental health issues tend to bring into your life, are the worst thing. I mean, you need to have a good support system and you need to have loving people in your life. And if those people aren't going to be those people to you, then they're just like the toxic guy at work that runs his mouth. It's the same thing. They're just not good for you. So I'm glad both of you were able to do that. It's very important.
I had to cut a few of my friends out of my life because they were like that. They call in the I guess it's pop psychology when they talk about toxic people. There's the one personality they call the straitjacket. and you can't do anything in front of them without them correcting you and telling you what to do. And come into your own home and then tell you how you should be watering your plants. That kind of.
Wow.
So, you're in my house. Stop bossing me around in my own home.
Right.
So if they don't get invited over anymore.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's important. It's important to draw that line, and because the bottom line is all of these different mental health issues, they control our daily lives.
Mm-hmm.
And they cause us to not have the good life that we want or that we deserve, or both, and deserve. So that's the biggest battle is basically saying fuck off. I'm not doing it anymore.
Yep.
It's hard to do that. Yeah. It's hard to say no. It's hard to say I'm done. It's hard to step back and look at the whole picture and realize who that toxic person is in your life, because then you have to admit it, Yeah. And most of us are really good people, and we don't want to think that this person's bad, but the bottom line is that we really know that they are.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think that long before you make the decision to kind of cut them out of your life. It's just like, I know personally for me, I'm a major people pleaser. So when people would kind of take advantage of that, I would wear myself thin, just trying to make sure that they were okay. And then, but the second that I wasn't there for them, they'd tear into me. And, finally, I had one probably about 5 years ago that I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And I knew it wasn't right, that she was obviously taking advantage of me, but I didn't care enough about myself to stop that.
Right. Well, because your mother told you your whole life you weren't good enough, and you did things wrong. So, then you do that. Well, I'm a piece of shit, so I have piece of shit friends. That's what I deserve. I deserve a piece of shit boyfriend or girlfriend, and I deserve no money and an old beat up car, and I'm not worth it. And why bother? You get to that why bother place in your head, which can be so bad.
Oh yeah. My physical
I've been there.
Paid for that. It affects everything, especially if you're completely neglecting yourself in those situations. Like, it makes your mental health worse, it makes your physical health worse, and then it just becomes this cycle of one gets worse, the other one does, and then makes the other one worse. So, yeah.
Yep. Vicious cycle. Absolutely. Yeah, and the medication thing too, Nels and I were discussing that on a previous stream. Because people have so much crap inside of them, they try something, it doesn't work, and they're like, they just, it's so hard for them to try again. It was so hard for them to go out in the beginning and try to begin with, and then to give it time to work, and then adjust the dosage, and then try something else. And it can be very disheartening. It really can.
Yeah, I've seen that happen a lot. I know my sister went through, I think, 6 different depression medications before she found one that worked for her. It took a while.
I was just talking about the other night, Casey. I'm sorry. We were discussing hypothyroidism.
Yes.
And how much chronic depression and misery that I had before when I finally got on Synthroid. It was like, oh, where have you been my whole life? This is wonderful. I feel normal. I'm not half as depressed. Didn't fix everything, but wow, just, when your body's not working for you, and that it's just a crushing amount of depression associated with that. It really is. I went to the public library, and I was in the psychology section, and and there was a book that was just simply titled Depression. And I said, I wonder if they had anything mention hypothyroidism. So there was an entire chapter dedicated to hypothyroidism.
Yeah, it's a big symptom of hypothyroidism.
Yeah. definitely is. Casey, I think I don't know who this question's for, but I'm going to read it out loud and you guys are welcome to answer it. So we are blind to it, then we see with great help, then we seek the same, then reject those people. What does it take to find balance and acceptance without us persecuting them for their sickness?
As far as the narcissistic person goes, I'm going to be honest, I spent many years just pissed off at my mother. And the entirety of blame for my current actions were being placed on her. And it really takes a lot. Like you can, if you look into some books on the subject, they can help you process it, or a therapist, but you don't have to forgive people, number one. That's not required. And as far as like not persecuting them for their sickness, the acceptance allows you to know that there are reasons for the way that they act, but those aren't excuses. So, what it took for me was kind of turning that empathy around on her and realizing that these things don't happen in a bubble. She obviously had stuff go on in her life that made her that way. And I can understand that. I can process that. I will never forgive her, but I have been able to move on through the book that we're doing the series on, and also through therapy. But it takes a lot of work. Like years
Oh,
work.
absolutely. and one of the hardest things to do, I think, is to forgive yourself for any blame you've put on yourself, or any part you had in anything, or whatever. It's forgiving yourself and for any issues, anything that you feel like, which is probably not true anyways, but any issues that you feel like you have exacerbated in your life, and you have to learn to forgive yourself and learn to love yourself. And that's hard.
That was a huge deal.
Whew. Big hurdles.
My fiance has been with me through this entire journey. We've been together 12 years now, and it was him that taught me that this wasn't normal. And so then I started processing that and seeing that it was abuse, and then like the basis of that book could also be, am I worthy? Am I lovable? And we don't feel that way. And I still have to remind myself to not be so hard on me. Like some of the shit that I say in my head, I would never say to another human being. I just wouldn't. And so it's been like, I still have a ways to go in as far as loving myself, but I've improved from where I was. So,
well, any step forward is a step forward. So even though you have to take into account even the little steps, because the expression "baby steps" is not bullshit.
No, it's not.
Like you have to. I feel like the problem a lot of people have is they look at the whole picture, and then they say this is too much. And so one of the things I've done in my life, and I've learned off of someone else actually, is to write those issues down and deal with one at a time. Look at the top one, cover up the rest of the piece of paper with a piece of paper if you have to, after you write them all down. Just look at that top one and deal with that. And then go down to the next one, scratch that off your list. Because it can be overwhelming to see that list. That's a lot of us have a long list. So
sure. And I still have moments where I'm like, I'll tense up when Greg gets irritated about something. He's never hit me. He's never abused me. He's never said any of the shit that my mom does, but somehow it's still a trigger in my mind, and I can go into flashbacks or panic attacks. And in those moments, I'm like, well, what good is the progress I'm doing? Because it's obviously still causing this. And so I have to kind of like sit down and kind of focus on the here and now, that I'm safe, and like try and process those thoughts and change them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, what's going on now and the good stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's also a good thing to do as well. Don't just write down the issues you need to address. As you're addressing those issues and you see something good come out of it, write down the good thing too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, scratch that out, now I have this good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Scratch that out, and I have this good thing. Because it's all about positive reinforcement. And even if we're doing it with ourselves, and no matter how old we are, we still need positive reinforcement.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, we're humans.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the way it is. We all need affirmation. We all need some love. We all need someone to pat us on the shoulder and say, hey, you're doing a good job. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to be okay.
Sure.
So having those kind of people in your life are the ones that'll bring you up and not drag you back down deeper into the rabbit hole. So,
and it takes time, it takes effort. And there are some things, like my therapist said, there are some knee-jerk reactions that I have that will be permanent because I learned them at such a young age that I won't be able to like unprogram that. But it's like dealing with it can be changed. Like, even though I still have that reaction, what can I do about it to lessen it? And I think a lot of people think that they'll see major improvement in a week, and when they don't see that, they kind of get discouraged. And it takes years. You have to think you were programmed for how many years to think the way that you do. You have to undo that. It's going to take a very long time, but it's so worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, the other thing I wanted to bring up, speaking of therapy, is you don't necessarily have to go to a one-on-one therapist.
Mm-hmm.
There are group therapies for pretty much everything. And I know there's like children of alcoholics, and there's group grief therapy, and there's all these different therapies you can go to with other people, and realize you're not the only one, number one. Number two, find other people that are very similar to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't feel like there's such a stigma attached to you, because the bottom line is that pretty much everybody I know, and people that come into work, and people I know through YouTube, and people I work with, everybody's got something going on. This is not this is not something that's new. You know, we all have different stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's good to find someone who's on the same level of recovery as you are, so you can strengthen each other and help each other through it.
Mm-hmm.
And
I constantly
which is
am.
one of the reasons I'm trying to do this. I want people to find that community and, you know,
it's so
find that help and love.
So important. I don't think I could have gotten to where I am today without support. Like, it's very important. And don't be afraid to ask for help from people as well. That's another hard thing for us to do. But
I think the tricky
because
thing
we don't deserve the help, do we?
Yeah, right. That's what you think. Yeah.
What's
I
that,
think the tricky thing with PTSD support groups is, unlike AA, as an example, people will go up and they'll tell their story about how bad their drinking problem was and how it cost them their job and how they got to be an alcoholic. If you start talking about what happened to you to traumatize you, it can be a trigger to other people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very difficult for people to be able to open up to each other without getting triggered.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, that person that may be triggered also now has a connection with you.
Yeah.
So it may be crappy at the time, but once you get past that hump, then it's a good thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
My wife wants me to try my phone, which was crapping out before. So I'm going to duck out for a second, and hopefully I'll be back in.
Okay.
Okay. We'll be right here. So, no, I think that's great you guys are doing that, because not only is it difficult to just sit down and read a book, but then as you're reading and you have these issues, how many times in your head is someone going, oh, hey, you know, blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
Or is it blah, 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 blah? And then when you hear other people talk about it, it'll clarify it for you, or point you in the right direction, or maybe give you some more encouragement, hearing you guys discuss all these issues that you guys are having. So
yeah, this
I think
is
it's
a really
amazing.
good idea for you to do this.
No, it's about you. I think it's great you guys are doing that with the book. I think it's great you're reviewing it and going over it, and it's important. People need to, just people need that. They need to know they're not the only ones, and they need to know that, maybe get an outside point of view on it without leaving their house.
Yeah, and it can even help if someone in your life has gone through this. It can kind of help explain why they react the way they react, or kind of explain how they got there, if that makes sense, and what you went through.
Right. Absolutely. So have you guys had like good responses from the community? Do you have people that feel okay to reach out to you? Because I know that's the big thing.
Yeah.
So you guys gotten some good responses with that? And
yeah, one person for sure, Done, she gets in contact with us, and she went through a lot of what we went through, and has left comments or told us through messages that it's actually helping to go through this. So there have been
good.
Probably a handful of people in chat that are like, yeah, hey, I went through this, or I know somebody who went through this, and it's been good. I mean, that was my goal, was to explain it and hopefully provide help and support.
Right.
And I should mention, my DMs
because
are
of everybody. Yeah. And thank you. I'll have Dave. Well, he always does it anyways. I don't have to have him do it, but he'll put your information back in it towards the end of the stream, so everybody can get a hold of it if they want to. But no, that's good. And I've had some people reach out to me that didn't want to talk to other people or didn't feel comfortable.
Wow. Yeah.
So I take that as a huge compliment.
Yeah.
Like,
it's so huge.
Oh shucks, little old me.
Right?
But yeah, it's a great feeling to be able to help people, and I'm at the point in my PTSD that I've overcome a huge hurdle. So through information I didn't have, 30 plus years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's the other thing too, is if you keep digging and you keep talking about it and you keep going over it, not only will it desensitize you to a point about the subject, because you've talked about it so much, it's more spoken, it's more normal to talk about it. But you can find little bits and pieces here and there. I mean, I did after 30 years. I found a piece of information that I didn't know existed that changed everything. And I felt that 50-pound child get off my back. And it was amazing. I could show you a picture of me from about a month. I have it on my phone from about a month before I got the information, and I looked like I was like 60 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I just looked at myself. I found it on my phone. I went, oh my God. And I looked at the date and I went, oh.
What is that?
Like it affected me that much. Like I sleep better now. I used to sleep 5 or 6 hours a night because I would wake up with shit thoughts or bad dreams or whatever. And now I sleep wonderfully, 9 hours at a time. I sleep like a baby. Like I didn't even sleep that much when I was a teenager.
That's awesome though. But yeah, the more it's talked about, the more normal it becomes, and the more like you're probably still going to have triggers with certain subjects and things, but how you respond once you get to that point can make a big difference. And like, I don't advocate that people search out problematic situations, but addressing it and kind of, when you're feeling completely fine, well, not completely fine, but when you're not as stressed, kind of say, okay, well, what's a trigger of mine? What can I try to process and respond to and hopefully lessen that?
Right. I found when I was going to my therapist, that I would get there and I'd be kind of blank.
Mhm.
They'd be like, "Oh, what do you want to talk about today?" "Oh,
Mhm.
So I suggest that people make notes.
Mhm.
Like, on this day of the week, this was going on and this happened. You know,
Mhm.
I went through this issue, or this popped up, or I had this trigger, or whatever. So, you know, don't be afraid to write it down and take it into your therapist with
Mhm.
you, because I don't know about anybody else, but I kind of feel on the spot. You know, they
Yeah.
set you down and you're on this thing and they're just staring at you like,
Yeah. It's like
"What do you want to
test
talk about
day
today?"
from high school. Like, oh,
Fuck,
you
I
the
don't
test.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The test is
Yeah.
in front of
Like,
you,
it's
and
like a
suddenly you're
proctored
just like,
test.
I don't know what I'm doing.
And they're like, "We have 1 hour," and you're like, "Ah, shit, I'm never gonna finish this test in an hour."
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Right.
I mean, I even do that with my physical doctor appointments. You know, write down all the issues I want to address in the appointment. But being your own advocate is really important, because that therapist is not going to know your issues. So unless you open up and you tell them, and you uh, kind of clue them in, they can help you process it, but they're not mind readers. So
Right, and that's exactly right, and you have to tell them.
mhm.
You have to communicate to them what's going on with you. They
Mhm.
can't. I mean, you could sit there and stare at each other and talk about the weather, but that's not gonna do any good. You could say, "Well,
Mhm.
I'm going to therapy."
Right,
"Well, what
yeah,
do you guys talk about?"
it's not
"Oh, well, the
helping,
rain. It's been rainy lately."
right?
I mean, that's not doing you any good until, I mean, maybe at first to get used to the therapist. I'm sure
Right, yeah.
there's some kind of banter that should go on, but yeah, I mean, absolutely. Don't be afraid to speak up for yourself,
Mhm.
and be totally honest. Not just speak up for yourself, but be honest with your doctor and your therapist. That
Mhm.
is the most important thing,
It's so
because if you have something in the back of your head and you think, "Oh, this is fucked up. I don't want to tell them. I want them to judge me." They can't help you fix it because they don't know
mhm.
it exists.
Right,
You
yeah,
have to vocalize. You have to be honest. So yeah, absolutely.
100%.
So, Casey, what days of the week do you guys do your streams? What time? Like, if you want to
Um,
use a central or eastern time is fine.
it's central. We do premieres usually are on Mondays at 7 Central, so 8 Eastern, 8 p.m.
Okay.
And they're usually around like an hour and a half, I think, is what we sort of average. But
Okay.
like I said, this is going into like the heaviest part of the book. So it might, like, we might miss a week here or there because it is especially hard hitting. But we will be finishing the book. So yeah, if you're interested in
Yeah.
it, definitely. An amazing, it's a life-changing book. It changed my life entirely.
Awesome. That's great to hear. And for anybody that missed it, what was the name of the book again?
Will I Ever Be Good Enough by Carol McBride.
Okay, thank you, Carol McBride. Excellent. So is that on your channel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that on the #Heathen?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, I wanted to clarify that. So,
Yep.
well, good deal. I'm glad you guys are doing that, and I'm glad to see more females coming out and talking about it as well, because I mean, I know it's hard for guys to talk about it, but it can be really difficult for women to talk about that deep down crap, because we're such emotional creatures.
Mm-hmm.
You know, men tend to cover it up and bury it more.
Yeah.
And shove it down the bottom of the barrel, but with us, it keeps floating up. So
yeah, I was gonna say, it seems like women dwell on it more.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Dave. So Junk Shop said that kind of reaches back to the "I deserve this" y'all were discussing earlier. There could be a fucked up feeling that one deserves the bad stuff and he doesn't deserve to get help with it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. Casey was talking about that, because you have that. I mean, from what I've seen, like I said, I didn't have narcissistic parents as far as I know. Didn't really have a relationship with my dad, but I don't think he was narcissistic. but yeah, from what I've seen, that's absolutely the truth. That you don't feel good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not just narcissism. Like that's my PTSD does that to me.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't good enough for years. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't good looking enough. I wasn't whatever. I didn't deserve that. I can't do that job. I'm not good enough for that job. And it really, you will shove yourself down lower and lower and lower.
Yeah.
Which is where that support that we were talking about comes from. It's, you have to, even if you don't believe it all the time, it's still nice to hear, you know, I love you. It's still nice to hear you're an amazing person. It's still nice to hear you're beautiful and you're intelligent, and, you know, I'm here for you.
Mm-hmm.
So having
that's all it takes.
That support.
Like the phrase that we've kind of made a mantra through reading the book is, I am okay as I am. Like I'm good enough as I am. I'm worth it. And even if you don't believe it, just say it to yourself over and over again, because eventually you will.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. That is, oh man, that self-realization and that self-analysis and seeing that you're a good person and seeing you deserve good things. And that, I think that was one of the biggest hurdles I had to overcome, because I had trained myself to hate myself.
Mm-hmm.
I had trained myself that I wasn't all of those things, you know?
Mm.
So it's definitely, it took me until 37 years old before I started realizing, hey, you know what? I'm a good person.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you know what? I'm not stupid. Hey, you know what? I deserve to have something good going on.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's definitely a battle. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. So, you know, any of you guys listening to this later or in the chat or whatever, you know, don't be afraid to reach out to each other. I haven't met anybody in our community that's a total asshole in our little group. So if you reach out to anybody, even if like if you said, hey, junk shop, I need to talk to somebody, that's one of the nicest guys right there. Dave's a great guy. Those guys would, my brother, Richard, any of those guys would talk to anybody in a second.
Mm-hmm.
So don't be afraid to reach out. And it's not a bad thing if you have these issues. It's not a bad thing if you have PTSD or depression. It's not, you know, it's not a horrible thing. We're getting to the day and age that people are realizing that everybody has one or two or more of these problems.
Mm-hmm.
So don't be afraid to say something. Speak up for yourself.
Definitely.
It's very, very, very important. So
Dave,
so what do you think, Nels?
To ruin his image of being an ass.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
You said Dave? Oh, whatever. Psh. Dave, you don't have a chance in hell of holding that line, buddy. You better just give it up now. We all know better than that shit.
No, Dave's even helped me with some of the medical stuff I'm going through too.
You know, I gotta tell you, I know he tries to be like, I'm a big asshole. No, seriously though, he's got a great heart, and there's never been a time that I have reached out to him or Math Pig that they haven't, as soon as they saw the message, as soon as they could, you know, responded and tried to help me with something, even if it was just a technical issue through computing shit that I didn't know about 2 months ago.
Yeah. That's good to have.
So, yeah. Yeah, we definitely have some good people in our community. So, if you guys are not subscribed to #Heathen, please do that. Show her some support and some love.
Thank you.
Mondays, 7 p.m. Central. I usually work Mondays in the evening, but I will try to, now that I know you exist and what your channel is, because Nels just really told me about you, I'm going to go over there and I will subscribe and hit the notification and see if I can catch some of your streams. And if you guys are ever talking about something that's not directly narcissism and ever want another point of view or whatever, I would love to come on and help.
Oh,
and you're always welcome to come on here. You're very personable. You're well spoken, and you know what you're talking about. So if you you ever want to come on and talk about something and want 2 platforms to use to discuss an issue so we can reach more people, reach out to me. You have me on Twitter or whatever, and I'll pull you on as soon as we can whenever our schedules line up. So I think you're amazing.
Thank you. You're amazing.
Thank you.
Too. What you're doing
is
really important. Yes, you are. See, there's that doubt.
No.
There's that doubt coming at
you. No. I'm just very humble. I don't take compliments well, but yeah, no, seriously though. And you know, thank you, Nels, for connecting us with Casey and setting all this up, because if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. So I appreciate you, buddy.
Well, I hope we're going to have many more conversations with many more interesting individuals.
Oh, I'm sure you will.
Yes, that's what I'm aiming for. I want to get different perspectives from different issues and try to, get something going here. So, Casey, thank you so much for coming on. Truly, it was an honor, and I really appreciate you. And Nels, thanks again for being your awesome co-host self and doing some legwork while I was working and I couldn't see past the end of my nose with sleep. And everybody in the chat that it remains, thank you so much for coming. Anybody watching this later, like I said, there's the Twitter link to Casey is in the description, as well as Nels. 2 amazing people. If you guys want to reach out to them, I know that they will be more than happy to help with whatever. So thank you guys. Have a great day and peace out.